Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle challenged the Elven Kingdom for Riveria's love movie. Before we start, please go support VicMarVaz for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. Frustrated by her inability to consummate her love with her beloved, Riveria decides to act right under the noses of all her colleagues in an attempt to legally catch the rabbit. Belle is in danger, and it's at the hands of none other than a beautiful elf. He will also be forced to endure a hellish ordeal by someone he never expected to see. Prologue. You have the most dreamy eyes for someone who rarely sleeps, Ulfia. Generally, the Loki Familia headquarters always demonstrates a calm and pleasant atmosphere, the exception being a couple of minor jokes between colleagues. However, the place had been like a barren minefield for the past couple of days, especially with all the elves around. All due to the shocking news that Riveria Eljas Alf, princess of an entire race and vice-captain of the family, had been officially announced as one of the members of bellcranel's harem, aka the uncrowned king. Of course, the chaos was kept confidential from the outside, and all the high-ranking officials made it clear that none of them had the right to judge the decisions Riveria made, or interfere in her personal and romantic life. But that wasn't enough to quell the ocean of discontent among all the elves, men and women. They had staged a kind of protest amongst themselves and refused to participate in the dungeon exploration, effectively halting much of the Loki Familia's actions. Tusk, should I expel these bastards? Loki spat out, completely furious. He didn't know what to do about the whole mess tearing apart the usual unified and indomitable family under his command, and aside from going to confront Belle himself in person, he really couldn't think of anything. Don't rush things, Loki, Riveria advised with a relaxed expression. That same expression made Loki raise an eyebrow and shout loudly. Are you aware that this is your fault, Mama Riveria? Why him? No, why did you even agree to enter? You're a high elf daughter of the king. You should have known something like this would happen. You could have chosen any man literally. Do you know how popular you are with men? Hundreds of thousands would kill to be by your side, and you choose a damn polygamous rabbit. I would appreciate it if you stopped calling him rabbit. He doesn't like it. As if I cared what he likes or dislikes. That damned wretch. For a moment, Loki seriously considered pulling out his hair and letting out a scandalous scream, but he did his best to restrain his emotions. She took a long breath, then sighed and repeated the same process for a couple of minutes. She figured that if she wasn't a goddess, she would surely have a heart attack that could end her life. When she finally calmed down, she glanced at the woman in front of her. Hey, aren't you dressed up more than usual? Where's your royal robe? In my closet. Loki sensed that asking about Riveria's cute summer outfit would only result in an answer she herself wished she didn't hear, so he didn't ask. Instead, he gazed at the gentle smile on Riveria's lips. That was something he never imagined he would witness. Doubt nodded her, and then she asked the question, do you like it that much? Riveria looked at her silently, seemingly thinking about or remembering her moments with Belle as well as how they met. Then, the gentle smile blossomed into a natural beauty capable of outshining dozens of goddesses. Yes, I love him. Loki let out an exasperated sigh, not knowing what to think about the situation. Fine. Although it would have been better if you'd kept it for yourself, you know. I wouldn't mind stealing it from Freya if it's for you, since that boy is the very embodiment of absurdity. You think I didn't think that? Riveria said, a little disheartened. But Belle loves Miss Excella too much, and she let him have other partners even after he won that fight. You saw her yourself. She's not the type to stand idly by and watch someone steal her boyfriend, is she? Sigh, that girl is a monster. How on earth is she able to nullify all magic and abilities? I felt chills when I saw her fight. That's precisely why I decided to be one of many. Between being with him and not being with him, I chose to be by his side even if I'm not the only one. Besides, Belle is quite charming and persuasive in his own way. That's no excuse for being a womanizer. The conversation escalated to a point where Loki no longer wanted to listen to Riveria's words, who was acting like a love-struck maiden talking about how perfect her Prince Charming was. Seeing her in that state sent a shiver down his spine, so he tried hard to silence her. Well, he said curtly, changing the subject, what is it you've come to ask for? Is it too obvious? Your outfit screams it. Riveria opened her eyes, then looked at herself. Her body, usually covered by the Fairy King's sacred robe, now wore a lovely jade green summer dress with embroidered pleats and white decorations on the edges. After looking at each other for a couple of seconds, she turned her gaze back to Loki and asked, is there nothing left? What, of course it suits you. Hell, you could easily take the place of a goddess of beauty, you know. Thank you for the compliment. I hope Belle feels the same way. Just tell me what you want and stop talking about that wretch who's caused such a commotion in my family. Seeing Loki explode, Riveria cleared her throat and adopted a more serious demeanor. She knew what she was about to ask was absurd considering the family's current situation, but she truly wanted it. Slowly and looking intently at Loki, she expressed her request. I need you to get a permit to leave the city for 2 people, for me and for Belle. Loki stared silently, processing Riveria's words. By the time he did, his usually closed eyes widened as he screamed. An exit permit? Are you crazy, woman? No, I just want a few days as a vacation. Yes, of course, and coincidentally that boy is included, isn't he? Well, I must make the most of the time Miss Axella has allotted to each of us, and I intend to do so in the best way possible. You're crazy, you're really crazy. Love has corrupted my Riveria's sanity. Riveria had to endure listening to Loki's incessant screams for quite some time, but in the end she managed to get what she wanted. Of course, it would be Loki who would have to deal with the guild, but she was fully confident that she would manage it before noon. She soon stood up and left her goddess's office, displaying a lovely smile and expressing a great deal of eagerness and anticipation on her face, longing to have some time alone with the owner of her heart. Shortly after, on one of the market streets near the Chimney Mansion, Belle walked alongside Haruheim and Cassandra. After a heated discussion with Axella, they had both obtained permission to go out together to buy food, so now they were walking hand in hand with Belle, their faces quite red. Don't force yourselves to do it, go at your own pace, Belle comforted with a gentle smile. This is nothing, Belle-sama. Why yes, I saw in a dream that I'll be able to tame the rabbit. He glanced at the pair of cute, blushing girls beside him who were acting rather adorably shy in his eyes. He could hardly believe he was able to have 2 such beautiful girlfriends, and it was certainly impossible to deny that being looked at with envy by the men around him was quite pleasant. After all, only he was able to take their hands, and over time even get to something more intimate. Grandpa, I hope you're watching me from beyond the grave, he thought with a victorious smile. It was just as he thought that and was about to point to a vegetable stand that his body was pulled at a devilishly fast speed, so fast that even he was unable to react. What an enemy attack! Alvis deployed defensive attacks. What? Yes, sir, Master Bell. His attempt to use his support ability to get him out of trouble was in vain, as half a second later he received a blow to the back of the head that knocked him unconscious. Even if Alvis could act even with her master unconscious, it was easy for Riveria, who was the kidnapper, to convince her not to act. What do you prefer, that she be with me or with Miss Axella? Riveria couldn't hear Alvis naturally, but the fact that she wasn't attacked by Belle's magic was enough of a positive response. Such was Alvis's animosity towards Axella that he disobeyed an order from his beloved master. Although it was also for the best, since Belle would definitely commit suicide after learning that he had ordered an attack on one of his girlfriends. Okay, then let's go, darling. Riveria smiled triumphantly and continued on her way to the gates of Arario with Belle in her arms, ready to take the carriage that would take them to their destination. Belle-sama, B. Belson disappeared. Haruheim and Cassandra, on the other hand, paled when they noticed the absence of their boyfriend, who had been standing next to them just a second before. But the paleness in their faces was not so much due to Belle's disappearance, but to the idea of having to explain that to Axella, who would undoubtedly punish them. Just imagining it sent shivers down their spines. Chapter 1. If you feel like you're losing everything, remember that trees shed their leaves every year, but they remain standing, waiting for better days to come. Riveria Eljos Alf. An hour later, Belle awoke from his unconscious state, rather agitated, looking around with some caution before finally exclaiming at his kidnapper. Riveria, Belle, you're awake. Not that there was much to look at since he was inside a carriage. The interior was upholstered and well-ornamented, almost looking like royalty. Beyond that, he could only see the changing landscape through the window and feel the constant movement caused by the road, as well as his lovely girlfriend Riveria. She looked at him with a soft smile, reaching out to take his cheek and caress it. What's going on? Belle asked, quite confused. Have you kidnapped me again? I thought we talked about that, Riveria. Riveria smiled slightly at the mention of the past, before eloquently offering her apologies. Well, you haven't left me much of a choice. You're always surrounded by girls, and that's planted a seed of unease in my heart. I felt a trip for just the 2 of us would be the right reward. Even so, Axella will surely be upset. I know you have an agreement with her, but I don't think that agreement allows you to leave the city. That was absolutely true, and Riveria knew it very well. Although Axella allowed a polyamorous relationship, she was quite strict with the amount of time she gave each partner, not to mention the rules. The rules about not having Hex until after marriage were absurd enough, and the next one was that no one except her could marry Belle. In short, it was an obvious they won't have Hex with him hint from him, and none of them could help but feel uneasy about it. Okay, I have everything planned. I just have to endure the punishment when it's all over. But Riveria already had a way of circumventing such rules, and Belle couldn't help but question her when he saw her so confident. And you think you'll survive? Wow, are you going to let me die? Well, no, but you're definitely going to have a bad time. Riveria laughed softly, finding Belle's concern for her rather sweet and exciting. Well, in his own way at least. You're only going to say that after not seeing each other for days. Stop playing dumb and kiss me, darling. WL. They stood side by side, holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. Bel's cheeks burned and his heart could barely pump blood properly through his body. That was one of the many effects Riveria had on him. Thanks to her noble aura and refined attitude, it was difficult to treat her like just another girl. Everything about her radiated an aura of maturity and charm, so much so that just looking at her was enough to seduce Bel. You're too slow. Riveria whispered, cupping Bel's cheeks and pulling him closer. Their lips met in an instant, beginning a gentle kiss. Softness and moisture enveloped their lips, each savoring the other's taste. Riveria was quite bold and couldn't resist taking a step forward. She slowly invaded Bel's mouth with her tongue and entwined it with his, sharing fluids in a rather heated manner. Bel's hands soon began to roam over Riveria's body, and she offered no resistance. In fact, she even began to emit soft, erotic moans, stifled by their passionate kiss. Ha ha, I love your taste. Taking a breath, they stared at each other, their eyes completely blurred with excitement. They had done something similar once before in another carriage, but they certainly hadn't gone beyond some light groping before Loki interrupted them. However, this time it was different. They were still halfway to their destination, and no one was allowed to stop or knock. The driver had even been paid a considerable sum of money to ensure he didn't stop at any point. You can only touch, understand. Riveria murmured in Bel's ear before biting it lightly. Bel shivered with chills, nodding slowly as he brought each hand to a different area. The right hand cupped Riveria's soft breast, while the left hand made sure to massage her cute, firm bottom, making her moan. On, Bel, I missed you so much. Me too, Riveria. They both let their bodies fall onto the comfortable upholstery of the carriage, kissing and touching each other. The only reason they didn't get to something more explicit was because Riveria herself agreed to remain chaste until marriage, so she settled for rubbing Bel's member over her clothes, as well as being touched in the same way by him. Kiss me more, faster. Yes, whatever my princess commands. Don't try to embarrass me, you fool. Thus, the journey didn't feel as long as it actually was, and Riveria and Bel met at the entrance to Melon an hour later. Melon was mostly known as a port town whose main source of income was fishing. However, its beautiful scenery was significant enough to make it a tourist destination, especially its beaches. How much did this cost? A couple of hundred, I think. Bel swallowed hard as he rolled his eyes at the place where they were staying, which was practically a luxury cabin facing a private beach hidden among the rocks, which acted as a wall around it. The sea crept in from the front, maintaining a calm swell with clear waters that allowed you to see the shimmering sand. The palm trees scattered around the place gave it a tropical touch that would drive any summer lover crazy. Is it really okay for us to enjoy this, Riveria? I feel bad for the others. They'll have their chance, I'm just taking advantage of mine. Come on, let's go to the beach. It was hard to say no when she smiled like that, and even more so when she seemed so excited. They held hands and left the cabin, ready to contemplate the ocean view and feel the texture of the sand on their feet. Did I already mention how beautiful you look in that dress? Bel said mid-walk, eyeing Riveria's summery style. The way the wind swayed her dress, giving him a glimpse of her pale legs, was breathtaking, but he couldn't tear his gaze away. Riveria noticed, and yet she enjoyed it instead of complaining. She took great pride in being attractive enough to make Bel drool. I was about to hit you if you hadn't mentioned it when we got in the water. Does it really look good on me? I don't usually wear things like this. Are you kidding? It looks amazing on you. If someone told me there was an elven goddess, you'd definitely come to mind immediately. Some of you won't get anywhere with flattery, you know. You won't have my virginity until we're married. I didn't even mention anything about that. Foo-foo, but you've thought about it, haven't you? Riveria flashed an amused smile, and when they reached the shore of the beach, they both sat down on the sand. She leaned her body against Bel's, and he took her in a hug around the waist, pulling her closer as they watched the sun set over the horizon. Their arrival in Melon was around 2 p.m., but they certainly took their time to see the street stalls as well as sample the seafood. It was now 6 p.m., and the sunset reflected on the ocean gave them a wonderful and romantic view, enough to make them kiss once more, falling onto the sand and running their hands over each other's bodies with loving caresses. Remember, you can only touch. If you try to put your fingers in or anything else, I'll freeze you. Can you say it in a way that doesn't sound so explicit? That excites me more. Foo-foo, maybe I'm trying to tempt you. Why, you're cruel. Night came quickly, and after a bath together, they lay down and flirted for a while before falling asleep to await tomorrow. Especially Riveria, who already had a planned and coordinated agenda. Chapter 2. There are people who die young, and in the end they end up being buried at 80 years old. A feminist. The next day was supposed to be wonderful. A good morning kiss, a bath together, cooking and having breakfast while contemplating the sea view, a couple of little cuddles, and maybe convincing her to go a little further. However, here stood Bel facing the king of the elves, Larfel Eljas Alf, Is this garbage your romantic interest, Riveria? Father, stop calling him that. Belle broke out in a cold sweat, unable to comprehend what was happening. Standing before him was a tall man with dark jade hair and a pair of sharp eyes that exuded anything but good intentions. The displeasure was noticeable even to those who did not have a sensitivity to looks like Belle, as even Riveria was aware of it. Belle, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I thought it would be better for you since you tend to get nervous and plan things you end up not using. Are you upset? And no, I'm not. And even if he were, he wasn't stupid enough to say it in front of Riveria's father, who looked at him like he was the worst piece of trash in the world and openly showed his desire to cut him in two. Now it would be fine if he came alone, or at least not too bad, but the dozen well-dressed and armed elves behind him were a problem. So, said Belle, drawing their attention, may I ask the reason for your pleasant and unexpected visit, father-in-law? You dare call me father-in-law, you? At Belle's slip, King Larfel frowned and raised his hand, causing the elves behind him to draw their swords. The soft sound of drawn metal tickled Belle's ears, and he was about to panic before Riveria intervened. Wait, father. He stepped between Belle and Larfel, eyeing the latter with suspicion and annoyance. You could even see the faintest hint of a pout on his cheeks. You promised not to do anything crazy, remember. If you're going to act violently, you'd better leave. Be but daughter this filthy human has. And stop calling him that or I'll never speak to you again. Yes. Belle watched the discussion silently, staring at Riveria's back. Right now, he didn't dare look at her rear end, because if he was seen, he would definitely be executed. Well, aside from that, he did learn to be a bit more discreet in how he expressed himself. Now that he thought about it, calling the king of an entire race father-in-law was pretty mean and stupid. I got a little nervous, he excused himself, taking a breath to calm down. Shortly afterwards, a consensus was reached where everyone agreed not to resort to violence, and then they took their seats at the kitchen table except for the royal guards, who set about forming a secure perimeter for their king. Now Belle was staring intently at the king of the elves, and the king was doing the same, while Riveria looked at them both with noticeable nervousness in her expression. So, Belle murmured, glancing shyly at the elf, how can I help you? King Larfel made a face of disgust, suppressing the urge to object. Do you think I need anything from trash like you? Know your place, human. For Riveria, his beloved daughter would definitely be angry. Instead, he cleared his throat and spoke gruffly. I want to express that I am against your relationship with my daughter, father. Riveria objected, but King Larfel did not back down. He made a slight movement of his hands to indicate that she should be quiet, and continued to tell Belle his feelings. I'm not so petty as to hate the fact that my daughter chose a human. She's free to love any man she wants, regardless of race. But, well, that was the problem, but Belle decided it was best not to interrupt him and let him finish, especially since his father-in-law seemed about to explode with anger. But that she's part of an indecent harem. That's it, that's it. Beads of cold sweat trickled down Belle's forehead as he watched King Larfel's aura change drastically, making the atmosphere heavy. He was not supposed to possess Falna, however. He could easily feign the power of a LV5. That's unacceptable to the royal family. She finally erupted in anger, looking at Belle with a great deal of contempt. Riveria carries the blood of noble fairies in her veins, and you little rabbit-like human, dare to defile her nobility with a fetid attempt at a harem. You have dishonored the royal family, and that is punishable by death. The entire Eljas Alf family, progenitors of an entire race, considers you their mortal enemy. This was getting out of control, Belle thought. His father-in-law was getting bigger and bigger, and he was getting smaller, feeling ashamed because in fact everything he was saying was true. He had no excuse that sounded coherent and could save him from the harsh verdict of the king of the elves. What do you have to say in your defense, you human who tarnished the history of an entire family? What did he have to defend himself? Of course, Belle had nothing like that. The thought crossed his mind to shout, no one will ever love Riveria as much as I do. But he had a feeling he would only get a slap from King Larfel. Now he could only stare silently at his father-in-law, who was breathing heavily in an attempt to calm his anger. Then he looked at Riveria, who wore a complicated smile and seemed equally unsure of what to say. All she did was stare at him, hoping he could change her gruff father's mind. This is very serious, he thought. He turned his gaze back to King Larfel, who was impatiently waiting for an answer that would give him the perfect excuse to take Riveria back to the elven forest. However, Belle was able to see through his eyes. He took a short breath and spoke in a firm voice, his gaze sharp yet sincere. I'm sorry, I know you're right about everything you said, but still, I don't intend to cut off my relationship with Riveria. You. Because after all, I love her, and neither you nor anyone else in the world will ever separate us. Even if it costs me my own life, I will burn it to the very end as I prove my eternal love for Riveria. Riveria tried her best to hide the intense blush that covered her cheeks and pointed ears, but the attempt was completely in vain. Shame mingled with happiness at having heard the feelings Belle held for her, and honestly she felt she fell in love with him 1,000 times more, when she thought that was already impossible. King Larfel silently watched his daughter's reaction before turning to look at Belle, who was still staring at him with that same sincere, sharp gaze. He perfectly conveyed that those words carried his true feelings, as well as his willingness to fight to the death to make them count. I expected this, but this brat is really challenging me with his gaze. For a moment, King Larfel wanted to let out an exasperated sigh. However, he held it back with dignity as he walked toward the shameless man who dared to take his daughter. Ja, you really are bold, uncrowned king. I'm a little embarrassed that you know my adventurer alias King Larfel. I'll stop beating around the bush. The moment he said it, the place suddenly became heavy, and Belle anxiously awaited what his girlfriend's father would say. If the answer was no, he would escape with Riveria without hesitation. But if it was positive, he could only thank her for her blessing. You've seen my bodyguards, haven't you? Well, it's hard not to notice them when they're wearing such shiny armor. It's a demonstration of power and wealth, kid. A commoner like you wouldn't understand it. Already, Riveria rolled her eyes at the childish attitude her father was displaying towards Belle, believing she was dreaming. She had never seen him act like this in her life, as he was usually solemn and dignified on every occasion. However, now she saw him fighting like a 5-year-old child. Perhaps it was due to the natural rivalry a father felt toward the man who tried to take his beloved daughter. Riveria, for her own sake and mental health, wanted to believe that was it. In any case, King Larfel reiterated, they are members of the most powerful force in my kingdom, the Jade Dragon Knights. That's a pretty amazing name. Cuckoo, I thought of it myself, it's great, isn't it? Wait, no, stop messing with my mind, you filthy low-level human. In the end, Belle thought his father-in-law was simpler than he had imagined when Riveria told him about him. He glanced discreetly at Riveria, conveying doubt as to whether she had lied when she said her father was dignified and elegant, and she could only look away, saddened by what was happening. That alone was enough for Belle to understand that all of this was abnormal in the king in front of him. And what about the Jade Dragon Knights? He asked, trying to move the conversation forward. King Larfel noticed and silently thanked him, clearing his throat before dictating his thoughts. They were initially the most promising candidates to have the honor of taking my daughter Riveria's hand in marriage. What? The air around Belle changed in an instant, of course. That's how unpleasant the mere mention of Riveria being taken as a wife by someone other than him was, and he was bold enough to make that clear to King Larfel. But he was not intimidated by the aura of an irregular LV5 like Belle. After all, he was the king of an entire race. Belle didn't know what, but he was sure he possessed a strange power that allowed him to stand firm against his intimidation. It's just as you heard, boy, King Larfel stated firmly. They are the children of the noble families that consolidate the power of my kingdom. Perhaps not as strong as the royal line, but it is true that the same blood flows in their veins as we do the Eljas Alf family. I'll overlook that hostility in your eyes towards me as a special favor to Riveria, kid. The atmosphere became tense in the blink of an eye, and Riveria, despite wanting to intervene, did not dare to step forward because she knew that this was something Belle had to resolve on his own. Otherwise, she could find no way for Belle to gain his father's recognition, as well as his blessing. As I was saying, they are Riveria's main contenders to continue the line of succession, and although you have gone against the natural order of things, traditions are sacred to us. Every word King Larfel spoke resonated deeply with Belle, who stared at him unblinkingly. The slight furrow in his brow made it clear that he was not enjoying listening to such a story about traditions. But King Larfel did not stop, nor did he even think of doing so. Due to the great lack of respect for our traditions, the wise men, heads of the 12 noble families of my kingdom, formally lodged their complaints. And what did those complaints say? King Larfel's gaze sharpened when he heard Belle's tone, which, unlike before, expressed no respect or tact. They simply dictated and demanded an answer to their question, as if he were a king. It was quite ironic and amusing that his alias himself was king without a crown, as he certainly exuded the aura of one. They asked for the abolition of your relationship with my daughter, and I agreed. King Larfel managed to catch the faint sound of something cracking, and after paying closer attention, he noticed that it was Belle's fists. They were squeezed so tightly that blood began to seep from them. Don't rush into anything, brat, he advised with a fierce smile. I'm aware of my daughter's happiness with you, and despite hating the fact that she's in a polyamorous relationship, I'm still her father. Naturally, I'll always wish her happiness, and if she's happy with you, that's fine by me. For a moment, Belle blinked in disbelief. He looked at Riveria, and she displayed the same disbelief as he did. It was quite clear that King Larfel had hidden his intentions, even from Riveria. However, the king said once more, returning to the subject and not allowing them to speak, I am still a king, and it is my duty to respond to the requests of my most loyal subjects. That is why I agreed to abolish your relationship with Riveria on one condition. Belle swallowed audibly, waiting just like Riveria to hear about that condition. Perhaps it was something complicated. No, if it involved Riveria's father, it would definitely be complicated. The seconds ticked by one after another, and then King Larfel revealed his intentions. I told them that if any of their heirs were able to defeat you, then I would take my daughter's hand in marriage and eliminate you from the equation. Riveria looked at Belle and he did the same. They were both silent for several seconds and then smiled broadly, holding back laughter. Is that all? Belle asked with a smile. I really didn't mean to be rude, much less arrogant, but the fact that a dozen elves could defeat him who was already a LV5 capable of fighting on par with LV6 and 7, regardless of whether it was an elite brigade, was quite absurd. Riveria thought the same, hence the lovely smile of relief on her lips. Her eyes met her father's, conveying that he should have made the test more difficult, yet she was also grateful for him making it so easy. King Larfel silently observed the confidence between them, staring intently at Belle. It certainly sounded absurd to pit an elf without fauna against an experienced and renowned adventurer like bellcranel, the uncrowned king, but what his ungrateful son-in-law and foolish daughter did not know was that the Jade Dragon Knights were warriors blessed by the spirits. They were not easy to defeat and they shouldn't be taken lightly, but Belle didn't seem worried and he spoke amiably. Can we begin now? I'd like to teach a lesson to those who dare to go after my girl. I want to slap him and wipe that stupid smile off his face. That could definitely be King Larfel's exact thought. However, he suppressed his desires and nodded solemnly. Let's go then. Chapter 3. I met someone special. She had heaven in her eyes and hell on her lips. One look was enough to make me lose myself in the stars, and one kiss from her to set me on fire. Riveria Eljas Alf. The place where the fight for Riveria's hand would take place was a little far from the place Riveria herself rented, since the aftermath of the battle could ruin her vacation spot with Belle. So because of that, King Larfel was forced to look for a more convenient place for the needs of his capricious daughter. That's how they found a desolate spot among the rocks where not even the ocean waves reached. If anyone cried out for help, they certainly wouldn't be heard. Then they will go from lowest to highest rank. He is Fergus Azoth, firstborn of the Azoth family. He is a spiritual user of the fire element. Belle appreciated the brief presentation, but couldn't help thinking that all of this was being a little unfair. Did they only have a spokesperson? The classism was blatant, and why did they emphasize the fact that they were nobles? Was the Cranel family noble? I highly doubt it. It was then that he saw that Riveria intended to announce it herself, so he quickly stepped forward and introduced himself. I didn't know why, but I felt that Riveria might be exaggerating things a little. I am bellcranel, captain of the Hestia Familia. His presentation was simple to the bone, and that in itself made most of the Jade Dragon Knights smile with contempt and superiority. Begin. As soon as King Larfel started the fight with a noble shout, the blonde-haired elf jumped back while making a strange hand gesture. Incinerate, Belle watched with mild surprise as several entities in the shape of small circles appeared out of nowhere around the elf, seemingly fire spirits. They all formed a majestic wave of flames that went in his direction, threatening to char his life. However, despite the imminent danger, Belle did not move and let the blazing flames engulf him. The elves who were watching clicked their tongues, thinking that if it was that easy they should have gone first and taken Riveria's hand. Now they could only envy the lowest-ranking member of their squad, who had earned the right to marry the beauty that was Riveria. Then Belle's voice echoed throughout the place. They are quite warm. What? Fergus couldn't help but gasp in disbelief at the voice of the one who was supposed to be charred beyond recognition, staring at the fiercely swirling flames. From there, bellcranel emerged slowly, showing absolute tranquility on his face. Riveria smiled proudly, while King Larfel and the other elves could barely hide their surprise. Especially Fergus, who had already entertained the idea of taking Riveria as his wife. His imagination had even reached their wedding night where he would take her body and soul. I'd like to make something clear, guys. Belle noticed the illusions in Fergus's gaze and with a frown announced freely. I'm not participating in this show to have Riveria, since she's with me of her own free will. I also detest the idea of treating her like an object or a prize, the way you're doing. What nonsense are you spouting, you filthy-blooded bastard? You don't have to understand, you degenerate who fantasizes about my girl. I just want to make it clear that since you're trying to take her by force, don't expect her to be nice. On the contrary, I will go all out and make it clear to them that the idea of trying to take her away from me is the worst thing they could possibly think. Belle walked far enough and emerged completely from the sea of flames, completely unharmed. Then he smiled fiercely, extending both arms to his sides as if he wanted to embrace the world. Do your best not to die, elves of noble blood, you. Fergus made the same movements as before, ready to launch a second flaming attack. However, that took him 3 seconds, and when he was facing Belle, that was an eternity. In a millisecond, Fergus found himself surrounded by 7 spheres of condensed fire. What is this? Ag. The fire spirits around him tried to protect him, but it was in vain as the fire orbs consumed them with ease. Then they exploded with a deafening roar with Fergus at the center. Only the cry of the poor elf could be heard amidst the continuous explosions, which did not stop. The rest of the Jade Dragon Knights watched with trembling eyes, unable to understand how Bell used magic without even reciting a chant. Alvis ceased the attack. "Your wish is my command, Master Bell." Bell stared at the curtain of dust and smoke for a few seconds, and when it completely dissipated, he could see Fergus's burned body, completely unconscious and barely breathing. He was out of action, and after receiving a settlement from King Larfel, he looked at the group of Jade Dragon Knights. Who's next? The fights from 11th to 3rd on the scale were completely even, ending with an absurd power difference. Most were spiritual users of fire, and thanks to Bell's ability, Sovereign of Flames, he enjoyed total immunity to any celestial body of flaming origin. In addition to his absolute control over the flames, and that combined with his 4-level fire magic, it was expected that none of the 10 elves so far could make him sweat or breathe heavily from exhaustion. In fact, Bell seemed as cool as a cucumber. A rather attractive and fiery cucumber in Riveria's eyes, who watched everything with a smile. Seeing Bell fight for her certainly thrilled her, and although she wouldn't admit it, it also ignited a flame within her. Now there were only 2 opponents left, who were the second and first most powerful among the Jade Dragon Knights. I am Jurgal Estitia of the noble Estitia family. Bellcranel, I challenge you to an honorable duel, recognizing you as a worthy opponent. I will disregard Miss Eljas Alf's offer, as I am more interested in comparing my strength with a warrior of your caliber. Please accept my intentions. Second in command, Jurgal was more worthy than the rest in Bell's opinion. He couldn't help but feel a little respect for him. He exuded the air of a knight loyal to his king. Of course, the reason I knew it wasn't a lie was because of the look in his eyes, which shone with a gleaming will. Did you say Jurgal? Very well, I accept your challenge. Thank you, honorable warrior. Jurgal bowed, then drew his silver claymore-style sword, wielded with 2 hands and sharpened on both sides. He took an offensive stance, staring intently at Bell, who at no point had drawn his sword. It is the cursed sword of rumors, with which he annihilated the Apollo family. Jurgal was slightly unsure whether to consider it good luck and feel relieved that the sword was still in its sheath, since a single cut from its blade was enough to extinguish a life. Here I come, Bellcranel. When he noticed her thoughts, Jurgal let out a tempestuous cry to rid himself of any doubt, and with the help of the wind spirits propelled his body at great speed to approach Bell. Instantly, in the blink of an eye, he was face to face with the white-haired warrior, and without hesitation he launched a crescent-shaped slash at him, aiming for his neck. But his sword was stopped by a small, rubbered, pentagon-shaped barrier covering the entire area of Bell's neck. The sparks danced in the air for a couple of seconds before disappearing into nothingness. Oh, you use spirits to enhance your physical abilities. Amazing. Haha, I wouldn't expect anything less. Wonderful, Bellcranel. Jurgal smiled with excitement, sweating profusely at Bell's incredible reaction time as well as that strange magic shield. He took a step back and kept his distance, wary of his surroundings in case those strange and powerful flaming orbs appeared out of nowhere and incinerated him. However, they did not appear. Bell flashed an excited smile as he drew the pair of daggers from the back of his waistband, assuming an attack stance. I couldn't simply use magic after seeing Jurgal's marvelous skill with weapons, which easily bordered on mastery. I will only consider this a victory if I surpass you in your specialty, otherwise I might lose some of my honor as a warrior, he said firmly. Jurgal remained silent for a few seconds, then let out a short, joyful laugh before resuming his offensive stance. Very well, I accept the challenge. Come at me with everything you've got, honorable warrior, of course. Their weapons soon clashed again, causing screeching echoes throughout the area. Jurgal unleashed a vertical crescent slash from below, raising a curtain of sand at the same time. His sword cut incessantly, again and again, seeking to break Bell's defense, who managed to resist with both daggers held. The difference was clear, and Bell had to admit with some resignation that, in terms of technique, Jurgal was clearly superior to him. Nor could he be discouraged since he had only been an adventurer for less than a year, while his opponent seemed to have trained since childhood. Something else he didn't know was Jurgal's age. He could easily be the same age as Riveria, that's not all yet. Jurgal's shout pulled him from his thoughts, watching with slight shock the splendid movement of Jurgal, which had made him retreat with a forceful and ferocious blow. It had been a thrust with a sword, something he never expected to see from that weapon. The versatility of movement and uses Jurgal gave his weapon was quite dangerous. Tusk. Bell's chest filled with a bitter feeling, as he came to the conclusion that he would lose the duel if things continued as they were. He had to choose between his honor as a warrior or his love for Riveria, and the decision was not difficult to make. Alvis. Yes, sir, Master Bell. Jurgal had perfectly cornered him, and just as he launched a killing blow, the rubbered shield appeared once more, stopping the blade's edge that threatened Bell's life. I see, Jurgal said with a smile which annoyed Bell. It's wise not to let pride get the better of you. Despite being young, you know your priorities. I respect that, Bellcranel. What the hell, Bell meant, was there really a noble elf like him? It was impossible for him to feel any kind of respect for Jurgel, who gave the perfect image of what a warrior should be. He slowly formed a smile, eliminating the annoyance from a short while ago and looking Jurgel directly in the eyes. Yes, Riveria is above any pride I might want to maintain. I admit I lost in technique. You can be proud, not many are able to admit their shortcomings. Those who do are destined to continually improve. Really. You sound like you know what you're talking about, so I'll take your word for it. Yes. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but those same seconds signified a deep mutual respect between them. After respecting that silence, they both nodded. I guess I'll give it my all from now on, Jurgel murmured, calmly looking at Bell. I suggest you do the same. Yes, it's not necessary, I had planned to do it. At once Bell posed as if he were about to throw a javelin, but what he held in his hands was not such a thing but one of his daggers. However, in half a second that dagger actually transformed into a javelin, at least in shape. Bell's lightning magic coated and reinforced the short blade, lengthening it. The twinkling lightning bolts collided with each other, emitting the tiny roars of thunder, embodying the presence of a real lightning bolt. Don't die, Jurgelson. Death is not something that is granted to me so easily, bellcranel. Instantly, Bell launched the lightning javelin and it sliced through the air, flying at terrifying speed towards Jurgel, who was grinning excitedly as he extended both hands forward. Talos Tempest. From the palms of his hands, a tempestuous windstorm arose, forming a fortress around him and protecting him from the lightning javelin. Upon impact, the beach sand exploded in a manner similar to an erupting volcano, and the explosion swept through the surrounding area with a powerful shockwave. An elemental spirit of the wind type, and he is a superior spirit, Master Bell. I see I'll have to be cautious. The sandstorm caused by the explosion subsided shortly afterward, allowing them to gaze at each other once more. They were so engrossed in one another that they had forgotten they were competing in front of an audience. My turn, Jurgel said, making a symbol with his hands. From the shape it was, Bell guessed it was an offensive attack, just like the elves before Jurgel had. But then, hey, Umberly Valkyr, isn't this absurd? Bell's expression turned pale when he saw the ocean, which was not supposed to be visible. That was the problem. Jurgel was also a spiritual water user, and behind Bell's back he had discreetly controlled the ocean waters near them. Now, right behind Bell, a gigantic wave was rising, threatening to engulf him completely and crush him without mercy. Shit. He had no choice but to turn his back on Jurgel to face the tsunami behind him, deploying a rubbered barrier, similar to a great wall. The wave soon crashed into the magic barrier, shaking the place and cracking it slightly. However, it was successfully stopped. I've got you. But that was Jurgel's target, aiming for Bell's blind spot. Elvis. Yes, Master Bell. Jurgel's sword stopped inches from striking Bell's body, as armor of shimmering lightning formed around him, acting as an impenetrable shield. Had he touched him, the electrical currents would have easily traveled through the metal of his sword and struck him, so he quickly retreated. You have perfect control over your magic, and it's incredible that you still don't show any symptoms of a zero mind. Well, I can say the same about you. You're a multi-spiritual user, aren't you? I thought that was just fairy tales. What can I say? I was blessed by my lineage. Bell smiled at the obvious and blatant lie. It was easy for him to understand after having crossed swords with Jurgel. He managed to glimpse the effort and dedication put into his technique as well as his spiritual magic. He took a breath, then sighed. Her eyes became serene, staring intently at Jurgel, who displayed a calm expression. I will end it all with the next attack, Bell announced. That is my intention. If that's the case, the same goes for me. Jurgel made a symbol with his hands, but it looked completely different from the usual ones. Alvis noticed that subtle difference, but there was no need to notify his master as he had noticed it too. It's merging two elements. Bell's surprise turned to admiration and excitement at seeing something so unusual even among the greatest mages in recorded history. He seriously wondered how Axella would manage to defeat an opponent like Jurgel without using her instant-kill abilities. If it was her, I was sure I could find a way. Ulutio. Jurgel finished his move by mentioning his technique, honoring a demigod of ice. Having combined the spiritual magic of water with that of wind, he was able to create ice, which now rose into the air, levitating and forming numerous icicles pointing at Bell. This is my final move, Ulutio Icicle Storm. The way of saying it fell far short of the scene, which was practically a sky covered by icicles numbering in the thousands. This is going too far, thought Bell, staring seriously at the thousands of icicles in the air. It almost seemed like a final judgment decreed by the god of snow. I didn't want to use it, but... Bell maintained a firm stance, and then, at his command, Alvis deployed 7 orbs of condensed flames. These orbs, unlike those used previously, were made of jet-black flames fluttering fiercely. If I don't do it, I could really lose, couldn't I? He said with a wide smile. Yes, I suppose. Jurgel nodded, grateful for Bell's show of respect. He had to admit that the mere sight of those jet-black flames sent shivers down his spine despite being at a considerable distance. They were so stifling that the already hot atmosphere gradually began to increase, and not even the icicles in the sky raised the temperature. It's all or nothing, I agree. Bell and Jurgle let out a shout, and as if part of a torrential downpour, thousands of icicles descended at high speed in search of their target. The orbs of condensed black flames, on the other hand, maintained their position levitating around Bell, firing black fire projectiles at the icicles. Hundreds and hundreds of explosions resounded loudly, making the environment, as well as the place, vibrate. The clear sky was soon covered by smoke and flashes from the attacks of both, which released a burst of steam upon impact. The largest-scale fighting continued for 5 minutes, and the first to fall to one knee was Jurgle, sweating profusely and breathing heavily. Ha ha, the overuse of his power finally took its toll and his vision began to blur. The icicles vanished and the black flame projectiles streaked across the sky with nothing to strike. Bell was also sweating profusely, showing the clear symptoms of a zero mind. However, unlike Jurgle, he could still stand. It's my victory. He cried between tired gasps, supporting the weight of his own body. The sweat on his face glistened in the sunlight now that the sky was clear, revealing a fierce smile. Jurgle looked up at him, catching his breath and almost spitting out a small laugh. Yes, it's yours, it was a good fight. He was. Shortly after, when they both managed to catch their breath, they shook hands as a symbol of respect and recognition of him as a worthy opponent. Then the topic shifted to the strongest of the Jade Dragon Knights, an elf with a cold and temperate gaze. I have no intention of fighting, however he threw in the towel, claiming he wasn't able to take on a fight where his opponent was obviously tired. It was pointless if neither of them was at their peak. And I would definitely lose, he added nonchalantly. Jurgle is stronger than me in terms of power. I'm only in first place because of one of my spells, which is a kind of instant kill. Well, isn't that a victory for you then? Bell asked, dissatisfied with the outcome. He wanted to fight and make it clear that no one would be able to separate him from Riveria, and the fact that the last elf refused caused a bitter feeling in his chest. You're wrong, the elf shook his head with his eyes closed. I can sense you still have several tricks up your sleeve, and one of them is capable of blocking my magic. It's simply a feeling. Upon hearing this, Bell remained silent, discreetly admitting that he actually still had a couple of tricks up his sleeve in case of desperate situations. I think you're not a bad match for Miss Riveria, bellcranel, the first one added, staring at him intently. Just make sure you make her happy. I'll do it even if you don't say so. The elf smiled slightly at Bell's stubbornness, who did not yield to rather obvious advice. In fact, he had to admit that he was a human with quite a strong character, something that was mandatory for the nobility. We'll meet again sometime, uncrowned king, he said before turning and walking away. Then Bell called, asking sincerely, May I know your name? My name. The elf turned around, looking at Bell. I am Nebulun Brandabaris of the Brandabaris family. A moment later, Nebulun turned around and resumed walking, heading towards the inn where they had been staying for a week now, before Bell and Riveria arrived in Melon. Bell watched his back disappear into the distance, as did Jurgle's and the rest of the Jade Dragon Knights. Now only King Larfel, Riveria, and he remained. Riveria walked over to his side, looking at her father just as Bell did, waiting for him to speak. Of course, they expected to hear her acceptance of their relationship as well as her blessing. That was the agreement. Bellcranel, King Larfel called, I have been able to contemplate the value of your feelings for my daughter. I admit it, you are worthy to walk beside her. For that reason, as king of an entire nation, I give you my blessing and consent to marry. Please take care of her. Thank you very much, I'll make sure to Wait, get married. Just as Bell was about to show his appreciation with a bow, his brain was able to correctly process his father-in-law's statement. He looked foolishly at King Larfel, who had one eyebrow raised as if asking, isn't it obvious? You must marry my daughter if you want to be by her side. Then he looked at Riveria, who displayed a cute blush along with a tender smile as she shyly averted her gaze, making it clear that she herself had planned all of this. Wait. Bell paled, am I getting married now? Not because of getting married, since he had planned to do so someday with all his girlfriends. What made him lose the color in his face was the fact that Axella would definitely castrate him for marrying another woman besides her. Chapter 4. Even though it wasn't fire, it made me burn, and I swear I'd never felt that divine sensation before. Riveria Eljos Alf. That same night in the cabin rented by Riveria. King Larfel returned shortly afterward to the inn with his guards to begin preparations for the wedding ceremony, which would take place the following morning. As Bell gathered, there were a considerable number of guests, as well as an elven priest brought from the Alf forest. It was also made very clear that this was something that was going to happen no matter what. Are you all right? You look pale. Yes, I'm fine. Riveria realized Bell wasn't being honest, and that made her feel slightly guilty. Of course, she didn't doubt Bell's love for her, but the reluctance etched on his face at the idea of marriage was clear. For her part, she was so excited that she could barely contain a shout of happiness. And although Bell also wished to marry Riveria, he was still worried about the variant called Axella. Riveria knew that Axella held a special place in Belle's heart, even if she disliked the idea of admitting it. That's why she felt that if Axella was his second favorite, then she could bear it. However, here they were, lying on the bed in the beautifully decorated room for couples in love and not even holding hands. "I'm sorry," Riveria murmured, letting her cheek fall against the softness of the pillow. "If this is too much, I'll ask to postpone it to a later date. It doesn't have to be right away. The important thing is that we're together." Riveria's words pierced Belle's doubtful heart like rusty iron stakes, causing him to grimace in frustration. He perfectly understood how excited Riveria was about the wedding, and yet here he was being so pathetic. But it was true that his thoughts were seriously debating whether it was right to marry behind Axella's back. Beyond the possibility of being castrated, he also needed to consider the feelings of the other woman. There was no point in having a harem if he wasn't able to bring the same happiness to all of them. At least that's what Belle thought. "Come closer." Riveria's soft, melodious voice reached his ears like the whisper of a night breeze, enveloping him in a warm embrace. It was impossible to resist, so his body was pulled by Riveria without any difficulty, ending with his face buried in a beautiful pair of breasts. "If I'm honest, I really want us to get married. I want us to unite in body and soul, but for that we need to consecrate our love in marriage through a ceremony. It's a custom of my people, I know, but it's important to me." Gently and delicately, Riveria used one of her hands to stroke Belle's hair, while the other traced his broad, muscular back with enticing movements. "I know Miss Axella is number one, so I'm determined to take second place for myself. I want to be your second favorite, Belle. Even though you say you love everyone equally, you have to understand that we'll always be competing for who gets more of your love and attention. I don't want to see them compete, I really love them all. I believe you, but a woman's heart is more complicated than that. We're capricious and competitive and will always take the slightest opportunity to get closer to you. Of course, the competition will be healthy, at least on my part. Yes, the one I'm worried about is Axella. I'm in danger of being castrated and well, you could seriously die, ha ha." Riveria chuckled at Belle's comment, which, although it sounded exaggerated, actually contained a lot of truth. More than anything, Axella was feared for how ruthless and cold she could be with people who disliked her, which was literally everyone except Belle and a couple of others. But for Riveria it was different. While Axella posed a danger when underestimated, it was different if the necessary measures were taken to respond to any situation. Because of that, she smiled mischievously as she whispered sweetly in Belle's ear, "Wow, don't you think the risk is worth it? Huh, well, after all, you'll be inside me. Isn't it worth it? Taking a princess's virginity isn't something just anyone can do, you know. Our Riveria, you're being a little bold, don't you think? Is that so? I'm just stating the facts. I also want to feel you inside me. I love touching you and being touched by you, but I'm ambitious and I want more." In an instant, Belle's face burned bright red, feeling the wetness of Riveria's lips biting his earlobe. His tongue slowly emerged, sliding down until it reached his neck and sucking it until it left a noticeable mark. "I'll show you something fun, okay? Maybe it'll help you decide." Belle swallowed, watching Riveria walk away from him and sit down on the mattress. Her beautiful body was covered by a camisole, which she removed in a matter of seconds. Underneath the camisole, there was a beautiful set of deep black underwear with suspenders. What are you doing?" Belle burst out, looking away. Of course, it wasn't the first time he'd seen Riveria in lingerie, but the style she was wearing now was almost too stimulating to look at, especially when modeled by a body as sculpted as hers. "Just a taste of what you'll have if we get married tomorrow, darling." Riveria flashed a flirty smile, making her look incredibly erotic. Her aura of maturity only amplified her charm hundreds of thousands of times, prompting Belle's lower body to rise. "Foo-foo, how cute," Riveria thought as she looked at her boyfriend's erection. Slowly, Riveria made Belle sit on the front edge of the mattress while she leaned her back against the pillows and the headboard of the bed, opening her legs in a masterfully daring way. Belle's jaw dropped as low as it could, dumbfounded by the dreamlike sight that was being shown to them. Her eyes, which seemed like swirling vortices at this point, stared at the paradise hidden between the pair of slender, fleshy, white-skinned legs. For a moment he thought he heard a call from that place, urging him to approach. "Do you like it?" Riveria was embarrassed enough to die, but she did her best to remain calm and composed. Besides, the blush on her cheeks and ears only enhanced her beauty, something she already considered impossible to do. "Then you'll like this better." As she said this, Riveria took the edge of the lingerie covering her crotch with her fingers, moving it aside to give her boyfriend a full view, who was now bleeding even from his eyes. "Our Riveria." He murmured, drooling and unsure what to say or do, but still staring at Riveria's crotch. "Tell you this, that's." "Yes, this is yours, darling." The forbidden part, considered divine territory by all men, dripped a colorless, thick liquid onto the mattress, spreading a seductive and lascivious fragrance that enchanted Belle. "Imagine putting your thing in here, it'll feel good, won't it? Imagine putting it in and taking it out again and again without stopping. Imagine filling me with your seed, our Riveria. Why, you'll be able to do that and more if we get married." Their faces were a complete mess. and Riveria was already showing signs of arousal. Her breathing was heavy, and the look in her eyes was beginning to blur and become cloudy. Her thoughts told her that if she continued, things would eventually escalate to something more explicit. "Don't you want to do it, darling?" "Why, yes, I want to do it." "Hey, Fufu, you're starting to be sincere." Before she knew it, Riveria was using two of her fingers to caress her crotch above the upper folds, which boasted a beautiful pink color. She was so wet down there that a lascivious, wet sound began to reverberate around the room, and Belle, as excited as he was, also began to pleasure himself while watching the show Riveria was putting on for him. When Riveria herself became aware of this, her eyes could not take their gaze off Belle's long, thick member, which gave off a strangely exquisite smell to her. Seeing him and being seen increased her excitement, and little by little she increased the movement of her fingers down there, spilling more of her juices. "Ah, this is bad, if we continue like this." They both thought at the same time, staring at each other. Riveria's sweaty body looked so alluring to Belle, adorned with glistening beads of perspiration running down her pale skin. Her flat stomach and slender limbs gave her a seductive allure that was impossible to ignore. The way she opened her legs for him, as well as the movement of her fingers stimulating his crotch, every single one of her movements bewitched him. He also couldn't ignore Riveria's heavy, heated breathing, as she stared at his member with a lost, clouded gaze. He thought it was a kind of beauty in Riveria that only he had the privilege of seeing. "You're beautiful," he murmured, making Riveria blush even more than she already was. Don't say something like that right now, it's embarrassing." She looked away for a second but instantly looked back at her boyfriend's member, not wanting to miss a thing. From time to time, he would steal discreet glances at Belle's defined abs, as well as his muscular body covered in sweat caused by excitement. She loved watching him breathe heavily as he devoured her with his eyes, which were more like a storm cloud than anything else. He looked so cute and hexy in her eyes, enough to make her even more aroused. "I'm almost finished, Belle, me too." They looked at each other, wondering with a certain hardness in their eyes. Will she be all right? Their breaths quickened, feeling as if their chests might burst at any moment. "To hell with it, I need to feel you." "Me too." Neither was able to keep their desires in check, drawing ever closer. Riveria pushed Belle onto his back on the mattress, climbed on top of him, and literally sat on his face. "Use your tongue." Her juices moistened Belle's face, but he felt no discomfort. On the contrary, his erection increased as he obeyed his girl's command and plunged his tongue into an unexplored paradise. "I'm coming. Belle, I'm coming." The instant his tongue entered Riveria's wet, warm, and tight space, she had an instant orgasm, arching her back unnaturally before falling back down to take Belle's load in her mouth. She was lost in pleasure, but she was sane enough to understand that she wasn't the only one who should enjoy the climax. For that very reason, she made sure to take every drop of Belle's seed into her mouth, sucking until there was nothing left. Likewise, his fluids flowed like a waterfall directly onto Belle's face, who could do little to avoid them. Seconds later, their bodies lost strength, and they collapsed in the position they were in. Only shortly after, when the trembling in Riveria's legs subsided, did they both settle down next to each other, embraced under the sheets in complete silence. Their hearts beat like crazy for several minutes, during which neither of them attempted to speak as they were dying of grief and shame. It was an incredible experience, of course, but it was the first time either of them had gone to such an extreme. It had always been touch and caress, so the leap was difficult to process at the time. Then, as the sound of the waves coming from outside played in the background, Riveria cleared her throat before speaking. "So," she murmured, blushing noticeably, glancing shyly at Belle, "is the wedding cancelled?" He looked at her silently, his cheeks still glowing brightly. He didn't seem to think about it. Unlike before, doubt no longer lingered in his eyes. "No," he replied firmly. "We will get married, and I will make you mine as soon as the ceremony is over." Oh God, aren't you interested?" "And no, yes, I am interested. I want to feel you inside me, and I want to sit on your face again." "While you can be tender and erotic at the same time, you idiot, don't make fun of your fiancé." "Haha, sorry. Oh, by the way, really, I know what, your flavor is delicious." Riveria took a while to understand, but when she did, her face literally exploded with bright red smoke billowing from the tips of her ears. What? Why, you're a pervert. What degenerate pervert." The outburst lasted a couple of minutes, but after calming her down, Belle stole a passionate kiss before they fell asleep peacefully in each other's arms, rubbing their naked bodies together and sharing a pleasant body heat. Chapter 5. "And if you get lost in the infinity of the universe, my beloved, I will find you even if I have to dissect all the galaxies." Riveria Eljas Alf. This phrase is my own work XD. The next morning, long before the sun rose, King Larfel arrived at the cabin where Belle and Riveria were staying, knocking loudly on the door until a very sleepy Belle opened it. "Why are you still asleep? You're getting married today, you need to dress properly to be worthy of standing at the altar awaiting my daughter." Bell looked at his now father-in-law with a face that conveyed, "It's 5 a.m. you crazy old man," but his words differed greatly from his thoughts. He couldn't insult the bride's father hours before the ceremony, and he didn't plan to do so in the future either. "I'll brush my teeth, and Riveria, she's still asleep. They slept in separate rooms, right? They're not married yet." "Oh yes, of course we did." In order to marry Riveria Bell, he needed to stay alive. Perhaps that's why he decided to lie slightly and not mention anything about the heated night he had with his fiancée. So he went into the cabin and came out a few minutes later having washed up and dressed for the occasion. Since she was staying at the beach, all she had in her closet were summer clothes, wide-legged Bermuda shorts and a button-down shirt with palm trees on it. "Where are we going? Isn't it obvious? To your bachelor party." "What?" "But the wedding is in a few hours, there's no time for that." "Dude, there's always time for a bachelor party. I had one so you'll have one too." That didn't make sense, but Bell remained silent while displaying a nervous smile and followed his father-in-law, who seemed quite animated. They walked for several minutes, leaving the hidden area and arriving at a small ramada illuminated by warm light in front of the beach. There were plenty of palm trees, and the calm waves of the salt water brought a cool breeze that touched the faces of everyone present. "What the hell is this?" "Master Bell, this is a trap." Alvis's observation made Bell nod to himself, rolling his eyes at the people waiting for him, the Jade Dragon Knights, as well as several elven women showing off their bodies in cute and attractive bikinis. Everyone was drinking cocktails and other beverages from coconuts, laughing and chatting amongst themselves. Even Jurgle and Nebulon were there, enjoying a couple of drinks and the company of some lovely elves by their side. Bell's common sense, where he firmly believed that elves were quite conservative, went out the window. "Come on," urged King Larfel, gesturing to the girls with a conspiratorial smile. "Enjoy your last hours of bachelorhood." Bell resisted the urge to punch him at his father-in-law's obvious intentions, who smiled like a demon tempting a human to then snatch away his soul. Of course, the elves were quite cute, something typical of the race, but he already had 3 cute elves in his harem, so he wasn't that impressed. He took a breath and spoke directly. "I'm sorry this isn't right. I'm getting married in a few hours, and even if I wanted to, if Riveria finds out about this, she'll definitely kill me. So goodbye, I'll see you at the ceremony." King Larfel raised an eyebrow at Bell's firm resistance. He was puzzled by the completely different reaction from what he had expected. If he was honest, he already assumed that Bell would jump for joy and pounce on the cute elves like a predator with an insatiable libido. That was the image the king of the elves had of his unloved son-in-law. "Are you serious? You have a harem, why would my daughter get angry after accepting something like that?" Bell had been wrong about one thing, and that was his suspicion of Larfel's intentions in bringing him to this ramada full of pretty, half-naked girls. "Actually, I didn't have something like, I'll show Riveria that this guy sleeps with anything that has boobs, but something like, wow, he turned out to be quite competent and serious with my daughter, I have to make up for my rudeness." Only after watching it a second time, and seeing how he showed genuine bewilderment and doubt, did Bell understand that this was not a trap. However, he still firmly believed that this was not the right thing to do. "You see, all the girls who are by my side are there because I love them and they love me. If I were to associate with complete strangers where there is nothing but lust, then I would be a real jerk. Oh, furthermore, it would be an insult to Riveria's dignity for her fiancé to be surrounded by women hours before the wedding. I appreciate the thought, but I politely decline." Larfel remained silent for a few seconds before nodding with a slight smile, gesturing to Bell with a certain respect. "I certainly can't force you to do something you don't want to do, so it's fine. What will you do then? Riveria must still be sleeping, right?" "I'll go back and make you breakfast. I'll see you in a few hours, King Larfel." Bell went back the way he came, walking along the seashore and feeling the coolness of the water and the texture of the sand rising up his sandals. Shortly after, he arrived at the secluded cabin where he and his fiancée were staying. He entered and went straight to the master bedroom, smiling as he saw Riveria sleeping peacefully, her face beaming with happiness. He approached her and kissed her forehead, then walked to the kitchen and began preparing a simple breakfast. The refrigerator was full of seafood, but Bell wasn't interested in making anything complicated. Instead, he grabbed a couple of eggs and a pre-cooked steak. The pan on the stove next to it, the oil gurgling, made a pleased noise as the piece of white meat was dropped in. "I really am getting married. I guess this will stay a secret. Otherwise, the others might really complain, especially Axella, who might even cut me off." He wandered in his thoughts for quite some time while his body unconsciously reacted and prepared the food. He was so immersed in his thoughts that he didn't even notice Riveria's presence behind him, wearing a semi-transparent jade green camisole, revealing a lovely black lace outfit. Riveria yawned before smiling slightly and catching him from behind in a gentle hug, resting her chin on Bell's shoulder and kissing him on the cheek. "Good morning, darling." Riveria, when? "Fufu, what were you thinking about that you didn't notice me? Maybe you're anxious for tonight." The soft sensation of Riveria's breasts against his back overwhelmed him, and showing a slight blush accompanied by embarrassment, he nodded shyly. Yes, I'm eagerly awaiting it. Riveria's heart leaped at her fiancé's bold reply, letting her imagination take over her thoughts. He subtly brought his hands to Belle's abdomen, gently caressing it while whispering in his ear, I'm going to predict the future for you. His warm breath made Belle jump, feeling a tingling sensation run through his entire body. Riveria smiled at that cute reaction, and after licking Belle's earlobe, she hinted in a mischievous tone, I'll leave you dry tonight, darling. Belle turned red to his ears, and Riveria giggled softly at his adorable appearance. Afterward, they shared a kiss and ate breakfast properly in silence. It was hard to forget Riveria's statement, but Belle concentrated on eating and didn't take his eyes off his plate. The day went on like this until hours later, when a horde of beautiful elves arrived in Riveria to do her makeup and dress her properly. The same was true in front of the cabin, where several elves and staff of other races were preparing the place for the ceremony to take place. Jurgil, who was one of the Jade Dragon Knights, arrived in Belle with a formal tuxedo in his hands. Everything happened so fast, and before he knew it, he was standing at the altar waiting for his fiancée Riveria, who was being led by her father. Standing on the altar, in front of dozens of well-dressed, sharpied elves watching me, next to a gray-haired wise priest in a suit looking rather restless, I watched my betrothed's majestic walking alongside her father towards me. She wore a beautiful pure white dress, a semi-transparent organza veil covering her beautiful face that only allowed the captivating sparkle of her jade-green eyes to be seen. As she advanced, she was followed by a beautiful royal train that sprouted from her waist and spanned 2 meters in length, spreading out like the crown of a great tree over the white carpet. The priest announced the bride's entrance, while I was simply fascinated as she approached. As soon as Riveria reached the altar, the priest gave the initial reading. I'd never been to a wedding before, so I really didn't know what was going to happen. That's why I stayed quiet as I held my girlfriend's hands. She was looking at me with such love from behind her organza veil. I looked at her and she looked at me, barely paying attention to the reading of rights and obligations in marriage. We were lost in each other's gazes until the priest's call brought us back to reality. Please proceed to say your wedding vows. Wedding vows? What on earth were those? Nobody told me about them, so I was pretty confused and lost. If I had to say something, it would be to proclaim my love for her, but could that be considered a vow? Just as I was about to say something stupid, I heard Riveria's beautiful laughter coming from behind the organza veil. My land. You are my land. I held my breath looking at her. Her eyes showed me a beautiful brightness that could not be hidden even by the darkest veil, and then she intoned what for her were her wedding vows. My people, you are my people. Exile and death for me are wherever you are not, so that's what it was, I told myself. She was expressing her feelings in words to me, a promise of love. I couldn't breathe, fearing that the noise of my breathing would prevent me from hearing her. And my life. Tell me, my life, what is it if not you? The beauty of her voice, along with the captivating sparkle in her eyes, completely captivated me, leaving me unable to pay attention to anything other than her. The sun may be eternally obscured, the sea may dry up in an instant, the earth's axis may shatter like fragile glass. All this may come to pass. Death may shroud me in its funereal veil, but the flame of your love will never be extinguished within me. My heart is yours, my feelings are yours, my body is yours, my words are for you, my caresses are for you, my kisses are for you, but there is something that is only mine, knowing that you love me. My chest jumped wildly. The words came to me like a typhoon on the plains of an abandoned desert, lifting tons of sand and revealing a beautiful sea of green grass illuminated by sunlight. You will possess me eternally, and until my body turns to ashes, my soul will be faithful to you. Riveria took my hands more tightly, conveying her feelings to me. I knew then that it was my turn. I got nervous, of course. I wasn't as good with words as she or Axella were, and I couldn't fully rely on my imagination to represent everything I felt for Riveria. Master Belle, do you require my assistance? I can dictate to you the most beautiful marriage vow ever heard. Alvis's voice sounded with a great deal of temptation, acting like a bright beam of light pulling me out of the darkness. No, I'm fine. But I rejected that light. I couldn't say something that didn't come from my heart, not after Riveria laid her most sincere and honest feelings on the table, displaying them with pride. I took a deep breath and sang, trying to keep my voice from sounding pathetic. More than anything, it was my pride as a man wanting to look good at such an important moment. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for my love for you is as strong as death, my passion as unyielding as the grave. My love for you is like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame, many waters cannot quench it, nor can rivers wash it away. I thought I was saying something nonsensical, but I could see behind the organza veil covering Riveria's face the smile on her lips. My improved vision allowed me to see a couple of crystalline lines running down her cheeks, overflowing with happiness, so I took the shame and insecurity and threw it away and even raised my voice. You are beautiful, my beloved. Exquisitely beautiful. Your eyes are like 2 emeralds peeking out from behind the veil, gazing at me with great love. I can't promise you there won't be bad days, but I promise I'll always be holding your hand. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you this way because I don't know how to love any other way. My throat felt dry, but I continued anyway. I couldn't say much, and it wasn't like I intended to drag it out. All I needed to do was make my love for her clear. We were, we are, and we will be together. I promise never to leave you, my beloved. When I finished, I became aware of the heat that engulfed my entire body. I thought I had thrown away my shame, but it was clear that a part of it had remained rooted in me. I had a strong urge to look away, but I couldn't. I didn't have the courage to stop looking into Riveria's eyes, which were looking at me with immense love. The rings, the priest said, and that was once again my turn. At least this was something I knew and something I had prepared beforehand. I took out the ring and gently took Riveria's hand, then slid the golden band onto her left ring finger. At the same time, I made a plea. This ring is the map to our infinity. With it, I ask you to embark with me on the greatest adventure of our lives. Riveria's fingers trembled slightly before she withdrew her hands and took mine, now placing the ring on them herself. The veil was still there, but I could see her beauty without removing it. In the simplicity of this circle lies our eternal love without beginning or end. It was short but more expansive than any cry of love, clearly demonstrating his lyrical supremacy, so much so that it almost brought me to tears. We lost our sense of hearing, with everything becoming soundless and missing the priest's summons. At least that's how it felt to me. Now, by the power vested in me by the kingdom of Alf, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. I only had time to hear her last words, and without waiting, I lifted the organza veil covering my beloved's face. She looked at me with a lovely smile, shedding tears of happiness that enhanced her natural beauty. Her hair, green like the most precious jade, fell like waterfalls on both sides, covering her shoulders. Riveria, Belle. I took her by the waist and she took my face in her hands, and then we shared the kiss that marked the beginning of a love officially sanctioned by the highest authority of an entire race. The shouts and applause soon followed, but we continued with our own thing, proving our love for each other and paying no attention to them. After that, the ceremony turned into a party. Drinks, food, and a group of musicians soon followed. The atmosphere was glamorous, fit for royalty, but my anticipation for the honeymoon prevented me from enjoying it properly. Mostly, I just smiled and thanked the people who approached us for their kind wishes. My father-in-law did the same, but now he was accompanied by his wife, who apparently had heard about the small party at the Ramada. To say that he looked completely different than when he was alone would be an understatement, but I decided not to give it much importance or think about it too much out of respect for the dignity of my dear father-in-law as a man. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, was so considerate and kind that I thought she was a character from a fairy tale. I was able to notice firsthand the source from which Riveria had inherited her unusually divine beauty. Why are you staring at her so much? This isn't what you think. Are you going after my mother? Although she doesn't look it, she's almost 400 years old. I tried to force a smile but failed miserably. Watching Riveria's jealousy was cute, but it was certainly awkward when she casually revealed her mother's age. For starters, even if I tried to court her, I'd probably be torn to pieces by my father-in-law. I didn't have those kinds of suicidal tendencies. Cat got your tongue. Fufu, soon I'll be eating something else from you. Look forward to it. I didn't have much to say to Riveria's suggestive and daring whispers as she smiled sweetly at the guests while saying such suggestive things in my ear. It certainly excited me, but it was wrong. Anyway, the night came to an end after a boisterous celebration, and after the guests had left, I walked with Riveria back to the cabin, ready to consummate our love. Belle, I'll make tonight the best night of your life. Don't be overconfident, it might be the other way around. I had to muster all my courage not to get caught in her game, and after closing the door to our room, I grabbed her by the waist and pulled her close to my body. Are you ready to be mine? Do it, make me your wife, my beloved. Chapter 6. The sad thing about some memories is that they show us things we couldn't see while they were happening. And these revelations, late like all learning, are wounds from moments that appear precisely when we most wish they would begin to heal. Nostalgic bar. My body was gently pushed. I was able to feel Belle's touch on my skin, vividly tracing my buttocks. He would occasionally squeeze it, making me moan, "You're being impatient, dear. It's because you're very hexy." The wedding dress no longer covered my body. Now I exposed it with black lingerie with transparent embroidery, revealing certain parts of my skin. No, it really wasn't like that. More than lingerie, they looked like mere threads covering what was needed. It was quite indecent, but it lent a lascivious air to this special night. The bra accentuated my chest, making my erect nipples even more visible than they already were. Don't I look indecent? I asked while looking away, quite embarrassed as I wrapped my legs around Belle's waist and he held me by the buttocks, caressing them as he pleased. Being carried in this way caused unfamiliar emotions within me. No, Belle smiled and kissed my neck. You look beautiful. There were these black necklaces with peculiar embroidery that prostitutes wore. I didn't have it around my neck but on my thigh, and yet it still made me feel like I was doing sinful things, even though I was a princess. Lemon skipped. Chapter 7. Lemon skipped. Well, I can wait until you sort out your thoughts. I smiled a little as I watched her, although I could really only look at her hair since it hid her flushed face, reluctant to look at me. It was certainly difficult to process her uninhibited side during Hex, but I wasn't lying when I said I found it enchanting. Seeing a usually demure and noble woman go wild for me filled me with pride. Anyway, I respected her silence and continued looking at the scenery while enjoying the warmth of her naked body. He was covered by a semi-transparent purple camisole, but the fabric was so smooth it didn't really seem like there was one in the first place. I could feel his skin and warmth perfectly. If I had to add anything to make everything perfect, it would be a cup of hot coffee. Of course, I thought about making one, but Riveria didn't want to move either. When I asked him why, he said weakly, "My butt hurts." She also couldn't move her legs freely without staggering mid-step, and even to get to the window, I found myself needing to carry her. Despite the fact that I was the one who ended up draining every nutrient from my body, it was she who ended up having difficulty moving. "You won't be silent forever, will you? Your voice is so beautiful." I received a light pinch on my side in response to my attempt to ease her embarrassment. Her body trembled along with her breathing, and then, raising her face to look at me for the first time, she murmured, "I want to die. I want to die." Her jade-green eyes held a watery glow standing out against the bright pink of her cheeks. The trembling of her eyelashes made it more than clear that she was serious. Even so, I didn't worry the way a husband is supposed to when a wife says she wants to die. Instead, unable to bear how cute and adorable she looked, I laughed. "Are you making fun of me?" "No, this, PFF, sorry." Once again, Riveria pinched me while making a cute pout. Although it didn't really hurt, I made faces to make her feel better. I thought about running away from her, but that would be too cruel since right now I couldn't walk properly. I was afraid she would burst into tears because of her emotional state. Vile rabbit. I remained silent when he stopped pinching me. He lowered his gaze again, leaning his body against mine. As the sound of the waves drifted through the window along with the night sea breeze, her voice sounded in a faint murmur. "Don't you regret marrying me? What's that about?" Well, it turned out I was a degenerate wife with rather questionable sexual tastes. His words were not entirely wrong. To be honest, I never imagined I'd end up having anal hex with her since she was an elf. I expected something like that more from Kaguya than from Riveria. Of course, it was a wonderful experience, so I had no complaints about it. If I wanted Riveria to understand that, I needed to be clearer with my words. "I don't regret marrying you. Having you as my wife is literally a dream." I admit I wasn't so sure about anal hex at first, but, well, I also admit I quite liked it. "Should I say your ass is amazing?" "Well, sort of." Stop saying such embarrassing things so casually. And don't talk about my ass, you pervert. I was pinched again, but not as hard as before. Apparently, my words were working. It was to be expected, since just as happened when we were getting intimate, Riveria felt happy when I openly declared that I liked her perverted side. "I'm your husband, so if I want, I can talk about how cute and hexy your ass is as many times as I want," I said firmly. "Besides, I liked it so much that I'd like to do it again when we have the chance." Well, yes, you're my husband and you can talk about that, but," Riveria said, pressing her body even closer to mine. The hand that had been pinching me stopped and subtly slid to my chest, gently caressing it. Are you serious when you say you want to do it again?" I mean you're talking about putting it back in my anus. Am I speaking in an ancient language? Just as you heard, I said I'd like to do it again." Riveria looked at me silently. Her face was completely red, right down to her ears, while her watery eyes exuded a strange sense of happiness. But it's a dirty, vulgar place." She murmured adorably, "Did it really feel that good to put it in there?" "It felt wonderfully divine, doubly wonderfully divine." Then. Suddenly, Riveria's remaining hand slid down to cup my lower body. Just as I expected, her lips were now curved in a happy, mischievous smile. Was this some kind of split personality? When he accepted his sexual preferences, his behavior changed spontaneously and radically. "If you say it felt so good and you want to do it again, then as your wife, shouldn't I oblige you?" "Wait, weren't you in pain?" "I want to do it, but I need to recharge. It's also time to go back, or Axella will come for us herself. I admit it hurts a little from how many times you used it non-stop, but if we use the leftover lubricant, well, it shouldn't be a problem." The moment Riveria smiled flirtatiously even after mentioning Axella, I knew I couldn't stop her. While I had managed to cheer her up, now I had to deal with her arousal. Anyway, was it really possible to be aroused by the fact that the person you love accepts your sexual inclinations and deepest desires? I sighed softly, looking Riveria in the eyes. "Do you want to do it?" "Yes, I want you to take my ass again, baby." "Did you even start swearing again? You're hopeless, you perverted wife." "Fufu, yes, I'm a huge pervert. Don't pretend. I noticed you get harder when I talk like this." "Do you enjoy watching me act like a vulgar woman that much, darling?" I smiled at his provocation. I confess that I did. Lemon skipped. Riveria was also able to maintain her sanity now. unlike when she lost her sense of self and gave in to lust. The way I learned about Hex was overwhelmingly terrifying. Even with Excella, who was my first time, we only did it 4 times before falling asleep in each other's arms. It was difficult for me to process that with Riveria, very different from what I expected, we ended up doing it countless times. Was it because of her first-class level? A level 8 adventurer wasn't a joke, after all. In the end, it didn't really matter. It was already a given that I had to be careful about Hex when it came to Riveria because I couldn't afford to waste all my energy on her and then let the other girls down when the time came. Or perhaps I should increase my stamina. Anyway, it was finally over. We had to go back to Arario tomorrow, otherwise Excella would really kill me. I was already dreading the punishment she would give me, so it was important not to make her wait any longer. The orb and ring he gave me to communicate with in case of emergency disappeared when I woke up in the carriage with Riveria. What did he do with them? I sighed a little, stood up, and went to the kitchen after putting Riveria to bed. She was so exhausted that she ended up falling asleep again. Even though it was early morning, I cooked something to regain our energy and we ate together. The image of her eating slowly while still half asleep made my heart skip a beat because of how beautiful she was. Shall we go to the beach? I thought you didn't want to because it was difficult for you to walk. Well, you can always carry me in your arms like a princess, right? I agreed with a smile, and just as she asked, I took her in my arms and we went out to the beach when we finished eating. Since she couldn't walk freely, we lay down on the sand under a palm tree while we gazed at the starry sky and enjoyed the waves of the sea. Belle, yes, I'll take an anti-pregnancy potion when I get to her. Even though you said it wasn't necessary. I told you so, but I shouldn't underestimate your luck. I'd actually love to give birth to one of your children, many even, but I know that would start a war between the girls, especially with Miss Excella. I'm not saying I'm capable of killing my son, but I also don't want to create a hostile relationship with her. If possible, I'd like to please her and improve our relationship. With everyone, but especially with her. Riveria no longer displayed the shame she had previously shown about having had anal hex. Now she seemed to have accepted her sexual inclinations, acting as she normally did while expressing her desire to get along with others. He took me out of the way, honestly. I thought you didn't like Excella. Well, I can't completely deny it, she said, smiling as she gazed at the sky. But she's someone important to you. I'm afraid that, much to my dismay, she has the power to drive you away from me if she so chooses. I'm not saying you love her more than us, but it's a fact that you care deeply for her. I suppose so. Yes, it is. So it's really strange wanting to get along with the woman who's taken care of you for so long. I just feel like that way we could really become a family. I nodded in agreement with his words. Normally, I would have thought that was too crazy. After all, Excella had trouble trusting anyone other than Kaguya, Eniasen, and me. It wasn't that it was on purpose, but rather a trauma from her past in which I had no power to interfere, even though she wouldn't say anything if I did. It was something she had to solve herself. Riveria. Yes, I took my wife by the waist and pulled her close. We were both lying on the sand, holding hands and looking up at the starry sky. Slowly, I lifted her on top of me and aligned our gazes. It will take time, but if you're patient with her, I assure you that Excella will come to consider you family. I admit she's a bit extreme, but when you're in danger, I'm sure she'll help you without hesitation. But as I said, it will take time. For now, I would appreciate it if you could be understanding about her tantrums and mischief. Tantrums and mischief. You know, like forbidding them from coming near me or delaying me when I have dates with them. Excella can be quite childish if she wants to be, although it's a part of her I like. Riveria looked perplexed for a few seconds before smiling gently. I see. Well, if it's my husband's request, I suppose I have no choice. However, I'm afraid it won't be free. What do you want? At that moment, Riveria rested her forehead against mine, caressing my nose with hers while her warm breath hit my lips. Isn't it obvious? Give me a kiss, is that all? Yes, but there will have to be many. Yes, I understand. I closed my eyes and gently took her lips. Unlike before, now we kissed gently while savoring the taste of each other's lips, enjoying the night breeze and the calm waves of the sea. The starry sky gave it a rather romantic touch, and the moon illuminated our bodies, which we explored with our hands. Riveria focused on my face, while I focused on openly caressing her cute, round butt. The swimsuit she was wearing barely covered the essential parts, so it was quite easy for me to explore and enjoy her soft skin. We continued doing this for a while, then we washed our bodies on the seashore and returned to the cabin for our departure tomorrow. Hey, should we do it in the bathroom? We set off for Arario in a carriage after handing over the cabin and buying souvenirs for the others, and when we arrived, it was just before noon. I parted ways with Belle at the entrance, as I didn't want to unnecessarily draw public attention. Even though our relationship was already known, it was still quite troublesome having to deal with other people's stares. Because of that, much to my dismay, I gave her a quick kiss and headed straight for my headquarters. I bypassed the greetings of my companions and the goddess and went directly to my quarters. It's spotless. My room was still untouched despite my absence, so I concluded that Lefia and Alicia took care of the cleaning while I was away. I sighed and relaxed as I undressed. The lights were off, but the sunlight streaming through the window curtain provided enough illumination to see clearly. And even without that, thanks to my high level, seeing in the dark wasn't a problem. You've arrived. At that moment, a cold breeze filled the room and the unexpected voice blew icily across my neck like the blade of a scythe. Despite knowing it was a product of my imagination due to the bloodlust that filled the place, I couldn't help but feel chills and shudder. I quickly turned to the corner of the room where I had previously seen and found nothing, but where now a female silhouette was comfortably perched on the sofa next to the nightstand. On that table, there was a newly lit magic lamp, illuminating the body of a beautiful young woman with oriental features. Her curvaceous body was difficult to hide even in her clothing, which covered most of her skin except for her neck. Her hair fell like waterfalls down her sides, boasting a beautiful jet black color darker than the night itself. And as if they were stars in the middle of the darkness, her water-green eyes with a crystalline background shone dimly, giving off an air of hostility. For a moment, I thought I saw skulls in her jet-black pupils, which focused on me with an empty, soulless emotion. "Miss Excella," I said his name, but I didn't get a response. She just stared at me from head to toe. I didn't think it was uncomfortable being in my underwear, but it was unsettling that he didn't say anything while he scrutinized me closely with his eyes. Until finally he aligned his gaze with mine. "Did you use that indecent body to seduce my belle? You have guts, I admit. I knew you'd be the first to defy my will, but I completely underestimated you since I didn't expect it to be so soon. Have you always been this bold? My mistake. I suppose your age has made you desperate for a man, hasn't it?" I couldn't say anything. When I tried to circulate mana in my body in case I had to defend myself, I found myself unable to do so. She was already using her magical restraint ability. Even so, that's no excuse for acting behind my back and secretly taking my boyfriend. Do you know the trouble you caused for the fox girl and the fortune teller? I almost felt bad about the punishment I gave them almost. It was useless to show resistance. The only reason I was still conscious was because of my high level, which escaped the conditions of his trap ability, but magic and everything related to abilities were completely sealed. Even if it was physical strength, she was an irregular LV5 focused on battle while I was an inexperienced melee mage. I had a really rough time these past 3 days. Do you know how much I missed my belle? Can you even imagine? I felt like I was going to die. Miss Excella, if you would give me the opportunity to speak. Be quiet, elf. One more word and I'll actually cut that lovely body of yours into pieces so small I can scatter them through the air. Very well then. Miss Excella stood up and walked slowly toward me. Even her walk was methodical, echoing along with the squeal of the tip of her katana, which she dragged across the wooden floor. You did the same thing once before. Even if Bell denied it until he was nearly unconscious, it was obvious he was covering for you. At the time I let it go, but now it's different. What should I do with a dog that won't obey its owner? When I was a child, I trained them unethically, but it was effective. Will it work for you? In a few seconds, Miss Excella was standing right in front of me. Her height was almost the same as mine, so her large chest pressed against mine, asserting her dominance. Tell me, is it okay if I cut off a couple of your limbs, you sly, slippery bitch? At that moment, the edge of his katana flashed inside the room, stopping right at my neck, which released a single drop of blood. If I fought, there was a way to win, but doing so would only complicate matters. I couldn't kill her, and as I'd told Belle, I wanted to get along with Miss Excella to the point of considering us family. If we started an argument now and it ended badly, that possibility would definitely disappear. You dared to go against my orders even though I allowed you to be by Belle's side when I wasn't even obligated to do so. Is this how you show your gratitude? I'm going to kill you. I felt the cold metal caressing my neck, sending shivers through my entire body, which was being pressed by the murderous intent emanating from Miss Excella. Looking at her closely, I could see the dark swirl in her eyes, which perfectly reflected her emotional state. She's out of her mind. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst possible outcome. However, the cold metal slowly withdrew from my neck, and then I heard the sound of the sheathing. A second later, Miss Excella's voice sounded in my ear. I would have done that if it weren't for the fact that Belle would be saddened. Besides, I promised to give up murder a long time ago. Oh well, what can you do? Thank you, yes. I could breathe again when Miss Excella returned to the sofa and sat down, looking at me as she crossed her legs and rested her cheek on her fist. Now tell me exactly what happened these past 3 days. If I detect even the slightest lie, I'll cut off one of your ears. Have I made myself clear, elf? Yes. The bloodlust and murderous intent also vanished, but the room remained permeated with a heavy atmosphere simply from his presence. She was undoubtedly a monster in terms of power. What happened was, I began to narrate the events little by little, having Miss Excella's full attention as she watched my every move in search of discrepancies. She was very serious about cutting off my ear if I lied. He fought against the royal guard and won, then he'll marry us off. At that moment, a sword pierced my chest. Confusion filled my thoughts, unable to comprehend what was happening. It was only after a second that, as if it had been an illusion, the sword disappeared from my chest, as if it had never been there in the first place. Did he make me see my own death with pure bloodlust? I gasped for air as I clutched my chest, struggling to regain my composure. At that moment, Miss Excella's voice reached my ear, coldly caressing my skin. Did they get married? PFF, haha. At my silence, she began to laugh softly. That laugh lasted a couple of minutes, and then a deep breath came from her. Then he looked at me and spoke forcefully. You bucking bitch, you dared to do such a thing. You dared to take my right, even knowing what that would entail. You really want to die, don't you? I don't regret doing it, is that right? In an instant, Miss Excella approached me and grabbed my neck in her hand, slamming me against the wall. The force was considerable, to the point of leaving me breathless. I can't kill you, but you should know I really want to. Anyway, because of this, you've ruined my week, maybe even my month. And no, it wasn't my intention. Don't speak. Just as he asked, I didn't say a single word, concentrating on breathing properly while enduring the intense gaze of his eyes. Sometimes I wondered how someone as beautiful as her could be so terrifying. The aura and pressure she exuded was no joke. She's the same one who defeated Fernay Jamal, a LV-7, being only a LV-4 in the end. The chaos that this news unleashed in Riveria was still fresh in my memory, since it was on that day that the usually cautious and mysterious Miss Excella made herself known and her fame as an adventurer grew. Right now, an irregular like her was holding me against the wall so roughly and mercilessly, while the thought of breaking my neck passed through her eyes. To think you were going to marry Belle behind my back. I confess it took me by surprise. Even so, unfortunately, I still can't kill you. Fine, we'll do this, Jade Elf. Miss Excella came close enough to murmur right next to my ear. No one except you, those present at that ceremony, Belle and me, will know about your marriage. I forbid you from speaking of it, even to your confidant, whoever that may be, and you will remain silent until I, as was meant to be from the beginning, marry Belle. Have I made myself clear? I nodded quickly. Miss Excella's eyes held a dangerous gleam that gave me a feeling something bad would happen if I contradicted her. As soon as I nodded, my neck was released and I fell onto my bottom on the wooden floor. I gasped for air, clutching my neck and clearing my throat, which burned intensely. Open your mouth, but I didn't have time to catch my breath. Despite asking me to, he actually squeezed my jaw with one of his hands and forced my mouth open. There's no need to ask, so I'll proceed directly. Saying that, he uncorked a bottle containing a blue liquid and put it in my mouth, making me drink it. Fine, drink it all. It was difficult because of the shock of the situation, but just as I wanted, I drank it all so as not to make her any angrier than she already was. It was as he said, if he could kill me, he would have done it without thinking twice. I can overlook you marrying Belle first, but I won't allow you to give birth to his child before me. That right belongs to me, so drink up and be sure to be careful when you're intimate with him again. But I never said anything about doing it. Miss Excella laughed drily from above, turning her back on me and taking a seat on the bed. You don't need to say it, I can detect Belle's essence in your body. Honestly, it bothers me, but I can't do anything about it since one day all women will want to do it. I guess it's their womanly instincts. After all, Belle is too cute to resist. Even so, the right to conceive your firstborn belongs to me. If you take it, I will forget any promises and cut your throat. Do we agree on that, Jade Elf? Yes, I understand. Well, I guess that's it. It's good that you're quick to understand your position. Miss Excella stood up with an innocent smile, completely unaware of the terrifying expressions from a short while ago. Even so, I said nothing and remained silent, waiting for him to leave. Now I must go punish that unfaithful rabbit. Should it be all right to cut off one of his arms? No, perhaps it's a good time to use the potion the blacksmith made to turn him into a baby. Fufu, I can't wait. He only had to keep quiet and she would leave, it was a fact. There was no need to prolong this meeting. Even so, my voice came out on its own. I hope that one day we can be friends. Miss Excella stopped walking for an instant right in front of the door, taking the knob and not turning it. I could only see her back and the jet black hair that covered her down to her waist. From that position, his voice crashed against the wooden door and bounced back towards me, lying on the floor. You're the type of person I hate the most, Riveria. Becoming friends will be impossible. I curled my lips into a weak smile, remembering the words Belle had said to me, words that contradicted Miss Excella just now, or perhaps it was she who contradicted Belle. By the way, he said in an amused tone, it was ingenious of you to take the ring and the orb and put it inside a monster in the deepest floors. You really gave me a hard time. I also made sure to teach a lesson to those who helped you. Lefia and Alicia were they called? Well, you can rest assured I didn't kill them. Upon hearing those names, a terrible feeling took hold of me. At that moment, Miss Excella glanced over her shoulder and met my gaze. My pupils trembled, but hers remained perfectly still, like the moonless ocean, as her lips twisted into a chilling smile. Knowing that, do you still want to be my friend? Right after saying that, Miss Excella left the room and disappeared from my sight. The end.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.